Hi, everyone. My name's Jessica, and I cannot see who's in here. So if you want to just type in the comments, just type a hey, or actually more effective, if you are applying in round 3, so the upcoming round, or whatever the April-May timeframe, March-April-May timeframe, can you just type that, just saying applying next cycle or applying in March, whatever? And if you're applying in next year, round 1, type applying next year. And that way I'll have an idea of um, how soon you need to know this information and just be able to adapt my presentation. So, hey, I see people coming in. We're live. Thank you for the first one who came in. Next year, round 1. Okay, cool. So keep doing that as we come in. I'm going to do a slow start here while people come in to introduce myself, and then we'll get into the material. So as you can see, my name is Jessica Shklar, and I'm a managing director at mbaMission. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background because I think it gives some credibility. I went to Harvard for college, majored in anthropology, and then, not knowing what else I could do, ended up working in education when I graduated. Found my way into admissions and worked in the admissions office of a very small university out in California that had 5 graduate schools and an undergraduate school, and I think total was still like fewer than 200 people. So I did all the admissions for that. It was a 2-person office, and because I needed to get the name of the school out there, the best way to do that was to travel around the country giving presentations. So I would give presentations on how do you pick a school and how do you write an application essay and all these kind of general topics to get people to come in and learn about the school. So that was my foundation. Somehow during that time, I had an epiphany that I needed to go to business school. And I ended up applying to Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, Yale, and UCLA. I got into all 5, which I promise is not a flex. I'm just telling you that to give you some, I know what I'm talking about with admissions. I've lived it myself, and now I've been at mbaMission 15 years doing this full time. After graduating from Harvard Business School, I went and worked at Coopers & Lybrand, American Express, and then a small consulting firm, always doing admissions coaching on the side, helping my friends get into business school. And then after getting laid off with the Bank One merger, ended with JP Morgan, ended up at mbaMission. And I've been here for 15 years and love every single minute. My anthropology background, my writing background, my admissions background, it all comes into play. So that's me. In terms of logistics of today, I actually want to get through these slides pretty quickly because my real interest is answering your questions. I think that's more valuable for you guys as well. So I am going to go through these slides. If you have a question that is preventing you from understanding the material, please ask that in the comments. If you have a question about your specific situation, hold off on asking that until I've gotten through the slides and then ask it so that I can answer it and address it. But I want to get through the material for the people who are here for that and then to take your questions. So again, if something you don't understand an acronym, or I stumble over a word, or you just don't get what I'm talking about, type that in. But any situation like, well, what if, or in my case, those, hold off on those. Okay? All right, this is a focus on how to build a compelling MBA resume. This is probably one of my favorite topics. I used to not like editing resumes, and then somehow a light bulb went off for me about 5 years into the job where I realized just how incredibly powerful they can be in telling a story. And there's really an art to a resume that is a little different from a professional resume, because business school resumes are really trying to get to know the whole person. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So what we're going to talk about today is why do other parts, and by that I really mean not the essays, right? Why do parts outside the essays matter? Sorry, that slide was wrong. And then we're going to talk about the resume and then about us. Okay, so why do other parts of the application matter? Aside from the GMAT, essays take up the most time. Okay, so you can focus on the GMAT and on the essays, and then I've heard horror stories of people who at the last minute suddenly realize that there's a resume, or they just say, I'm going to toss in my regular resume. Or they say, I didn't realize there was a long application, and they are scrambling at the last minute. But admissions officers, you don't know where they're going to start. They might start with your resume. They might start with the application. And first impressions do matter. So you really do want to make sure that you give respect to each part of the application as if it's the first thing that your recommenders the admissions officers will see. The admissions officers need to know see all parts of the application in order to get to know you both objectively, which is what I call the what components, what you have done, which is the resume, the GMAT score, your transcript, things like that, and also the who you are, which is the essays, which go deeper than what's on the resume. The goal for the school, for the admissions officers, is to build a diverse class. And so they're trying to get to know you across a number of different ways to be able to understand who you are. The essays are limited by word count. You only have so much you can say. So you want to use each part of the application to keep them learning more and more and more about you. Okay, so this is the subject of today. So the what I call the what qualification documents. These answer the question, what has the applicant achieved, and are used to determine if the application is qualified. The applicant is qualified. And if by qualified, I mean, do you meet the basic thresholds? Yes, your GMAT score can be below the average. You don't have to hit it on every single one, but it's an overall assessment that you're qualified. Okay, these are the what documents, the test scores, the GPA, courses, the resume, which is what we're talking about today, and the application. So let's start with, we're going to focus on the resume. Guidelines. 1 page, except for EMBA programs. Okay, if you're applying for executive MBA programs, you can do a 2-page resume. But all admissions officers want to see 1 page. They've all repeated that. That's not just to torture you or so they have less work to do. Part of the goal of business school is to teach you how to prioritize information. Right? I actually had a client who interviewed at Harvard, did not get in, but at that point, Harvard used to have this wonderful program where they would designate a week where people who interviewed and didn't get in could call and get feedback on their application. So that doesn't happen anymore. But they did that. And so when he went and got feedback, they said to him that the reason he didn't get in was that he rambled so much during the interview that they saw he wouldn't be a fit with the case method, because he just didn't, he couldn't prioritize and be succinct in terms of the discussion. So that's what you're trying to teach them in the resume as well. It's not a comprehensive everything you've ever done. It's a snapshot of the most important things you have done. So you do not need your address because this goes with your application. You should put your phone number or your email and phone number on there as 1 line, but you don't need your address on there. Don't need technical qualifications. You don't need your coursework during college because your transcript goes with this. And you don't need an executive summary because your goal is to get an application. What I mean by technical qualifications, don't list the programming languages you know. Don't indicate that you are very good with Microsoft Office. The business schools understand that you have the tools to do your job. For a professional resume, you would need those, but for a business resume, you don't. Okay? Should be easily scannable and capture the key information. Start with what you're doing now. In most cases, that will be work. I know a lot of people start with education. Generally, your education ended 5 years ago. And so you don't want to start with something old. So start with what you're doing now. And then list your jobs in reverse chronological order. You want to have well-defined sections. Professional section, then education, community, and personal. Okay, you can combine community and personal into an additional section if you want. If you're trying to tell a certain story with your resume, you can have a separate section. Let's say you want to be an entrepreneur, but you have another job, a full-time job somewhere else, and yet you've been running these entrepreneurial ventures on your own, maybe since college, and you had 2 or 3 of them. You might want to have a separate entrepreneurial section so that your resume supports the story in your career essay of being someone who wants to move into entrepreneurship. Education section. It should not be purely academic. Okay? It should demonstrate how engaged you were. So think of the education section as saying, what did you do during the education years? So the schools can look and understand who were you the last time, what were you like on campus the last time you were there? right? So that they can say, because they're trying to figure out what kind of student will you be on campus here. So it will tell them by showing what activities you were involved in. And then finally, this last bullet point, this is something that's really important. Schools that have blind interviews, and that's almost all business schools in the US, except for Darden, NYU, Harvard, and MIT. For most of the other US schools, your interviewer only sees your resume. You get selected for the interview based on the whole application, but your interviewer only sees the resume. So it really needs to be comprehensive. Okay. All right, guidelines for your bullet points. This is where I see the biggest mistake. Bullet points should be 1 or 2 lines each, in rare exceptions, 3 lines. Avoid jargon. I am talking to engineers and consultants. It does not need to be overly formal. You are not trying to prove, again, let's take a computer language. You don't need to tell them what tool you use to build whatever software program you were building. You need to tell them why that program was important. Okay? To ask, this is the most important point I want you to take away. Each bullet point should address your impact, not your responsibility. I'm going to give you some examples of that. But here's a good test for yourself. Read a bullet point on your resume and ask yourself, does this bullet point describe my job? Or does it provide evidence that I'm good at my job? Except for maybe the first bullet point for each job. And even then, I'm very hesitant to say that. Each bullet point should offer evidence that you're good at your job. We have a blog post called Accomplishments Not Responsibility, if you want to go grab that at some point. And it talks about this idea that every bullet point should end with what was the impact, which resulted in, which led to. Another test to ask yourself is, am I the only person in my organization who could say this bullet point? Okay, so responsible for developing marketing plans with the agency, well, that's pretty generic. You're not probably the only person who can say that. But built the top selling plan which the agency used to, you're presumably the only one who can say that. Here are some examples. And then I do see questions coming in, so we'll get to that. Again, I don't have a lot of slides here because I wanted to get to your questions. So, worked on several deals and pitches, including sell side and buy side, M&A, LBOs, and debt and equity financing. Okay, quick and super easy test. So those 2 tests I gave. Do you think this person is the only one in the organization who can say that? I'm looking for a bunch of no's. Looking for a bunch of people to recognize that this person is not the only one who can say that, right? Another way, thank you. All these no's suddenly came in. I was getting worried that you weren't listening to me there. The other test I said was, does this bullet point offer evidence that this person is good at their job? I'll assume you all said no to that as well. Okay? Look at how this person could do it. Led a $19 million upsizing of the debt financing at an operating company, a 5,000-acre organic farm with minimal oversight, enabled the company to take a dividend of X% only a year into the investment, outperforming the underwriting case. Okay. Do you see how much more specific that is? Nobody else in the organization presumably could say led. Maybe if there was a co-led, someone else could say it. But this is very specific. And we know from this bullet point that this person's good at their job, right? It outperformed the underwriting case, and they performed with minimal oversight. And if presumably by saying only a year into the investment, that's indicating fast. Now, you could have said 6 months ahead of schedule, but there's plenty of evidence that this person did well at this particular project. Let's do another one. Developed strategic business solutions to advise businesses on corporate strategy and transactions in 12 engagements. This one's marginally better, but very marginally, right? It's better only because they say 12 engagements. So maybe not everybody in the organization could say that because that's a pretty specific number. But it's still pretty general, and we don't know if this person's good at this, at doing this. But built and analyzed customer survey, market sizing model, and third-party retail store sales data to assess potential of target $200 million pet food distributor, Presented synthesized signings and recommendations to client which acquired target in 321. So this is very specific. Now, do we know this person did a good job? They don't have a metric to it, but we know that the client acquired the target. So we know that the work that they did was a valuable input. Sometimes you're not going to have a measurable metric of success. Sometimes the metric will be program I developed was rolled out across the company, or still in place today, system that I developed, or membership in my nonprofit has increased by, right? So sometimes there won't be those financial metrics, but there are still ways of showing that you did a good job. Okay. Delivering software to its 4 core 5G modem chipsets, enabling user devices to establish and maintain the best wire connection possible, accounting for various signal conditions and device mobility. Remember that the admissions reader is not from your industry. And this is getting a little technical, and it's a little bit hard for them to understand. Yes, they could read through it and understand it, but it requires some pretty careful parsing out, and it's not as powerful as we would like. So, delivered software for 5G modern chipsets used in cell phones, tablets, laptops, and routers globally to identify and establish connections with nearest network cell towers. Now we know why those are important. Integrated into 650 product lines worldwide. That's the metric that we know that they were successful. The software that they delivered was integrated into 650 products. Okay, still a technical engineering software bullet point, but much more understandable. I'm reading this and I know, oh, modern chipsets. I know what cell phones, tablets, and I might not know what a chipset is, but I'd rather see this than user devices to establish and maintain optimum wire connection. Like, I used cell phones, tablets, laptops, and routers globally to identify and establish connections with nearest network cell towers. Much more understandable to me as a layperson. Okay. So this is the application. So just to touch on this, because the application can overlap with the resume a fair amount. This is a fictional, non-mbaMission client, spent hours on his GMAT and essays, prepared for months, revised, and felt this application showed his best work. A month before the deadline, he realized there was a long application with dozens of questions he hadn't anticipated. Don't be like Joe. The application consists of demographic information, job descriptions, activities, and hidden essays. There can be overlap with your resume. The easy, not recommended, but the easy approach if you're running out of time is, yes, you can copy and paste and have the information be the same. That's not optimal. We would rather you did not run into a time crunch and use the information. Why repeat, right? They're going to see something on the resume, give them something else on the short answers, right? So sometimes a short answer will be, what's your greatest accomplishment? Probably your greatest accomplishment at work is, in 250 characters, is going to be on your resume. But it would be nice if you went deeper on the application. It wasn't just word for word. So you really want to kind of think of the resume and the application as being partner pieces. I think I'm going to skip the rest here. Yeah, the rest, I actually loaded the wrong presentation. So those were the resume slides, but I had some other information too. So I am going to get to mbaMission. This is who we are. Top ranked firm on GMAT Club, Poets and Quants. Only one Manhattan firm recommended by Manhattan Prep. Full-time consultants, we collaborate. We just are already working for you constantly. These are lots of events to try us. I saw a question, free 30-minute consultation. So you can do that through logging in. You can email info@mbaMission, or you can just go to our website and there's a tab for free consultation. You can fill it out and you can request a specific consultant. So that is, that's everything I had to say. And I'm going to now turn to your questions. So I will read them. I don't have international work experience. I never had exposure to my existing job, but I am competent enough to be part of a global team, bringing valuable impacts. How to apply for schools looking for international exposure. So it's a really great observation. I can't tell from the way you phrased it whether you actually are on global teams or you just believe you would be competent to. So international exposure, yes, the easiest way sort of to check the box there is to have lived abroad or have worked abroad. But if you've worked with people from other countries, and especially if you've had to navigate between them, that is international exposure. And I would play that up. Maybe on your resume, you would say, served on global team with members from India, UAE, US, and Canada, navigated across time zones to establish blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if you don't have international experience, maybe that bullet point really calls out the global team or the international team and the individuals. If you don't have that, you haven't worked with anyone that way, then maybe in your essay you talk about working with people with different points of view, different perspectives, because that's kind of a proxy for international experience if you don't have it. So, and sometimes you might just have to say, I don't have it, and that's something the school wants. That has made the school more risky. Okay. Share my email for the one-on-one consultation, info@mbaMission, or just go ahead and go to the website and fill out the form online. Okay. What are details to avoid in the resume? So I think you do not need to put in your address. Just email and phone number on one line is fine. You do not need to list all the programming languages you speak. You do not need to list college coursework because they will have your transcript. You don't need to list, if you're running out of space, you can avoid listing, summer internships from after your first or second year of college, or an activity that you did that just wasn't all that significant. If you haven't traveled extensively, you don't need a bullet point on travel. So you play with the resume in terms of what's important, but the stuff that's longer ago, generally is the stuff that I would first leave off, or the stuff that doesn't really showcase your impact and leadership. Okay. All right. I've applied to most schools in round 1 and 2, and I have interviews in March. I still want to apply to schools in round 3, but I'm not sure if the chances are slimmer in round 3. Should I apply in round 3? The chances are slimmer, and yes, you should apply, right? So it's answering both. The chances are slimmer because 90% of the applicants have applied, so 90% of the seats are taken, and they have a wait list from round 1 and round 2. But you're not going to get in if you don't apply. So as long as you recognize that it is a little more competitive because there just aren't as many seats, why would you cut yourself off from even having the opportunity? Right? That's how I see it when people ask if they should apply to stretch schools. I guarantee them they're not going to get in if they don't apply. So why not? As long as you can handle disappointment and put in the time to do a good application and recognize that it is more competitive, it's not impossible. They have a round 3 for a reason. Harvard stopped having a round 3 because they weren't getting enough people. It wasn't worth it. They could fill their class from the wait list. So schools that have a round 3, and especially this year where schools are adding round 4 and extending the deadlines, absolutely, I would take advantage of that. Okay. In regards to consultants, there's a big variance in terms of fees. For example, what I've researched, admissions consultants can charge as little as $3,000 and much as $12,000. What's $12,000 consultant? Well, I don't know what the $3,000 consultants are doing because we are at the higher end. What we bring is that we're full-time. So this is our primary job. We're not squeezing this around our other jobs. We will never miss a deadline because our boss asked for something, right? Our boss, the CEO of mbaMission, takes a back seat to any client work. He will not let us stop a client call to take him, right? No deadline will ever be more important than our clients. So we are all full-time. We also are extremely selective in the consultants that we hire. The other thing is we put our consultants through extensive training. So most consulting firms, you could be working with someone who's on their first day and has had no training. We actually have a 3-month process where consultants have to go through a number of old applications, every single step, with supervision before they can be live. And then for that first year that they're live, all of their work is reviewed by a senior consultant. So there's a lot of shadowing and mentoring and coaching to make sure that you are getting the highest quality. So that's just a bit of it. We also have an extensive research team that writes all these books that are free. We have to support those somehow. We have 20 insiders guides, start to finish guides, things like that. So, okay. Is it networking or is it 12,000 more geared to folks with big gaps in the profile? We will work with anybody. Some people just have very ambitious schools. They've got amazing profiles, but so does everybody else applying to their schools, and they want the differentiation. Sometimes they want the really individualized service of knowing that we will never miss a deadline. We will never not know their story. We are not handing our work off to $25 an hour editors. We work very closely with every single one of our clients. Would you recommend applying to R3 as an international to top tier USB schools? Oh, I'm sorry. Your last video helped me a lot with your video. Thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate that. Would you recommend applying in round 3 as an international? So the problem with international applying in round 3 is your visa. So you would have to really look at the timing of the decision and the timing of your own embassy and how fast the visa process works or what your specific situation is. Most US schools request that international applicants apply in rounds 1 or 2 in order to not get caught up in the last minute visa. I have a client this year who had to take a year off because they just could not process her visa. By the time she got funding and the bank came through, there's a lot of other factors, but by the time it came through, the school basically said, just take a year off. You can start next year, but we just cannot get it done in time. So, and that was an exception. So I would be hesitant to that, but you may have a unique situation. Sam, how many candidates does each consultant take? I actually can't answer that, Sam. I'm assuming you're talking about mbaMission, because there's no one number. The mantra of our company is each client needs to feel like they are your only client. So our commitment is we take as many clients as we can, keeping in mind that we never miss our 2 business day turnaround. We want to be available to you for an urgent call or question at any moment. And we want to really know our clients well. So, and also about half our clients add schools once they've started to work with us. So we have to be flexible. So, and we also look at our own schedules. A colleague of mine who's the mom of 3 young kids cannot take as many clients as a single guy who doesn't have any family obligations, right? That's just the reality. So the mantra from above is every client needs to feel like they're your only client. It's also clients are very different, right? If I work with a finance or engineering client, that takes me a lot more effort than if I work with someone from more of a nonprofit or marketing background, because I know that I don't need to double check everything. I'm sort of much more comfortable with that. So it's not that I can't do them both. It's just the effort I put in. I'm not going to charge my clients more. I take on that effort. So I will take fewer clients if I see that I'm starting to have more that take more time. We always can fill in with hourly clients if we need to. We have actually shut down the company 2 or 3 years in a row in the December, late December, because there simply is no one who has capacity, and we will not overextend our consultants because that ripples down to clients and we won't hurt them. Okay? If I apply in round 3 and get rejected, does it affect my application in the following year in round 1? So yes and no. The no side is this. Reapplicants are not viewed as damaged goods. Reapplicants are accepted at roughly the same rate as first-time applicants. And just think about this very, very logically. If you're an admissions officer and you're reading an application and you're thinking, this is a great application. This person's really strong. They've got great experience. The essays are well written. They really connect with the school. They've got great scores. Oh, wait, this person was interested in us last year too? Yeah, we don't want them. Right? Just think about that logically. That doesn't make any sense, right? So there's no reason that a reapplicant would be rejected. However, round 3 to round 1, it's very hard to do something different to stand out, to change your application in some way. Sometimes I've seen simply applying when there are more seats does make a difference. So sometimes it's just literally they don't have the seats, but they really want you, and round 1 is fine. But you do want to think about what can you do to update and improve your profile. Can you take a GMAT test? Can you take a course if you had a problem with your GPA? Are you about to get promoted at work? Can you take on another big project? So you want to try to somehow change your application without radically changing it. You can't change your career goal. For Stanford, you can't change what matters most to you and why. Like those are almost fixed from round 3 to round 1. Okay, so yes, but is my answer. All right. How much would you say professional designations would add to one's profile? So Taylor, it really depends on the rest of your profile. Someone who's had a 3.8 from a top school in finance and worked in multiple banks and private equity and always been known as, and has a super high quant GMAT score, a CFA is a nice additive, but it's not like, doesn't radically transform. Someone who's been in a nonprofit and was an English major, but who put in the effort to really get their CFA. Well, that's going to change it, very significantly and prove a completely different skill set. I would say most people are probably somewhere in between. So it can definitely be additive. It can also be just, oh, that's nice, right? In no case will it hurt. It's just the extent to which it can help depends very much on the context of the application. Okay, KP. How likely is it for a mature applicant, say 37 and 15 years of work experience, to cut through top tier B schools in the United States for full-time? So we don't have statistics on, the schools don't release the number of applicants by age who get accepted. We definitely know that there are fewer and fewer people over 30 at the schools, but that doesn't mean anything about acceptance rate at those levels. I would say if you bring something really different to the class, it's more likely. So if you've been in the military and that's why you're older, or I worked with someone who was 32 and went to Kellogg, whose family went through bankruptcy when he was 27, and he had to basically take over his family business and spent 3 years getting his family back on their feet. And then there was another thing that happened, so that was very logical why he was older. If you're from an overrepresented background and the schools have lots of people who on paper are similar to you, that does make it harder, because the schools want to take credit for your success. And if you've already been that successful, they don't know that they can have that big of an influence. The other issue is they want to make sure that you will be happy on campus. And a lot of 37-year-olds are not going to be comfortable being in a study group or being led in a project by a 26-year-old. So the schools will check that as well. If that is your situation, though, you're 37 and you want to apply to a top US school, then I would very much look at the Stanford MSX program and the MIT Sloan Fellows. Those are both full-time immersion programs, 1 year, designed for applicants with 8 for MIT, 8+ for MIT, and 10+ for Stanford years of experience. So you'll be with your peer group, the age factor completely goes away, and you still get that full-time experience at a top school. Okay. I'm 23 and have invites from Ivy League MBAs with people telling me from Stanford I'm too young, should I apply? Can you clarify that? You have invites for what? You have invites meaning they just sent you a random marketing email to say you should apply, or you have interview invitations? I'm going to assume, since you're asking if you should apply, that you just got like a promo email as a result of your GMAT score or something. 23 is definitely young, right? The sweet spot is probably 26 to 28 at these schools, 25 to 27, around there. That being said, if you have done something with your time, let's say you finished school at 21 and you've been working, you've had really powerful experience in 2 years, or you worked full-time while you were in school, then your candidacy could be very strong. So if you've been invited to interview for Stanford and Harvard, then why are you asking if you should apply? I'm definitely confused about something. But if you've been invited to interview, then that means they're interested and you should go for it, right? The acceptance rate post-interview is much higher than the overall acceptance rate. So if you have been invited to interview, I would take advantage of that. And just going back to the older question, the oldest person I've worked with who got into a full-time MBA was 38. She chose to go not to a top-ranked program because they gave her a full scholarship, but she got waitlisted or interviews at several top programs and just chose not to continue with the waitlist or continue with the process because she got a full scholarship from a second-tier program, and that's what she chose to do. But I have also seen, I think, a 36-year-old went to UCLA. I've seen 32 at Kellogg. So it definitely has happened. It's just, in each case, they were not typical applicants. Okay, so if you run a charity foundation and you applied and you've really done some great work with that foundation, it sounds like you're a strong applicant that they would, if you've gotten an interview invitation, that's already an applicant. Listen to the school, not to people telling you you're too young. What do they know about your candidacy? The school is the one making the decision, not these random people. So I would ignore them and just focus on doing a great job with your interview. Okay. How likely is it for Harvard, Wharton, Booth, UVA, Darden, and Columbia to accept mature applicants? So again, none of these schools released by numbers. We tend to see that Wharton, Booth, Darden, and Columbia are more older applicant friendly, but the same principle applies. You need to stand out and show that you fit with the applicant pool and with the class. And when I say older friendly, it means maybe the average age, or we see more 28, 29-year-olds, that, or the married portion of the class is a little bit higher. So Columbia, by the way, has a program that might be a better fit, which is their J term, which is an 18-month MBA. It's just basically the same MBA, but without the summer internship. So your first year is shifted. So if you don't need the summer internship, the acceptance rate for J term is higher, and you're still integrated with the entire program. Your resume, your diploma still says MBA. It doesn't say J term. That's a more flexible program for older applicants too. So it's the same thing applies to all the schools. It's less likely than if you're 26, 27, and the concerns are, if you're successful without them, why do you need them? And if you haven't been successful in 15 years, then the MBA may not make a difference. And will you get along with people younger than you and really fit on campus? How is the application pool looking this year and next year? So I have no idea what it looks like next year. I will say our volume seems to be up for next year. That could be a timing issue. This year, it seems to us like application volume was a little low. We are very happy with the interview and acceptance results so far. And the biggest indicator that we see is that schools are extending round 3 and adding a round 4. Most schools who've done that have put a caveat on the announcement saying, don't take this to assume that we don't have great people from round 1 and round 2. But it's hard not to assume that. They're doing that to accommodate for the tech layoffs. But I don't think if they were overwhelmed with people rolling in, more people than they could handle, they would necessarily be adding space. So I think this year is looking good. Looks very, very anecdotally like next year the volume will increase from this year, but that's all I don't have tea leaves beyond that. Okay. What else? Do you advise adding extracurriculars to the MBA resume? Absolutely. So remember that your interviewer is only going to see the resume at most schools. So you want the extracurriculars to be a conversation piece. Remember also that the resume is intended to give a holistic view of who you are, and that the schools are looking to understand who you are as a person, not just who you are as a professional. So make sure that your resume does list extracurriculars, and go back to that concept I said earlier of impact versus responsibility. Don't put on your resume what the organization does. Put what you do, right? So Big Brother, Big Brothers Big Sisters, an organization which provides mentorship to underserved teens. They know that. They know what that does. But instead, I would put something like, have mentored an underserved teen for 2 years, meeting weekly. In that time, their performance reviews at school, their behavioral reviews have increased, and their reading level has improved by 2 grade levels. Now I know what you've done. Okay, so yes, add extracurriculars, but the extracurriculars are about you, not about the organization. Is there a perfect MBA resume format that you recommend? No. I like the one in our book. If you download for free from our website, the Start to Finish Guide or the Resume Guide, there's a template there. And I think that is really good as a basis. But everyone's resume might be a little different. Some people have had multiple promotions within a company, so they're going to have lots of divisions under that one company. Other people have switched jobs. Some people want to mention their entrepreneurial experience. Some people want to mention that they've been in the reserves, and so they have a different section. So I think as long as it is readable, 1 page, no smaller than 10-point font and not bleeding out the margins, and emphasizes impact and shows a holistic view of who you are. Beyond that, the format is not as crucial, as long as you meet those criteria. But certainly look at ours as a template. You can download that for free from our website under publications. All right, thank you so much. Please feel free to visit our website, look at all of our free stuff, to schedule a consultation, and best of luck with your applications. Thanks, everyone. Can I share a resume template? Go to our website, KP, under publications, download either the free resume guide or the free Start to Finish guide. And there is a template in there that you can follow. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.